Hello, everyone. I am Christy Oliver, the Professional Development Manager at Davis Publications. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon for our first in a series of weekly webinars that will run every Tuesday at 3 p.m. through mid-June. Today, we are thrilled to have Dr. Lisa Kay with us. She will be speaking about self-care for art teachers, which is something I am sure we could all use during this very stressful time. A few quick housekeeping things before we get started. We would love for you to ask questions throughout our time together this afternoon. The best way to do that is to type your questions directly into the chat box. It looks like many of you have found it already, which is great. There is a little button at the bottom of your screen, so if you don't see it, it's a little chat icon. It says chat underneath it. Or you can use the Q&A. That's also fine. I'll be checking both of them throughout the afternoon. And also just a reminder that we are recording this session, and after we finish, the video will be available for viewing at davisart.com. So I would like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Lisa Kay. And if you want to just advance the slide, you'll see her. There we go. Dr. Lisa Kay is a board-certified registered art therapist and art educator who currently works as an associate professor of art education and program head for the Department of Art Therapy and the chair of the Department of Art Education and Community Arts Practices at the Tyler School of Art and Architecture at Temple University. Dr. Kay is an award-winning educator who has presented at numerous state, national, and international conferences and is featured in many prominent publications. She is the author of Davis's new Art Education and Practice series book titled Therapeutic Art Approaches in Art Education and the Related Professional Development Sessions. During our session today, you can advance to the next slide. During our session today, Dr. Kay will describe self-care, specifically highlighting how art teachers can use the process of making art as a form of self-care. She will also describe the Visual Notes project, which merges self-care with hands-on practice. Visual notes are small artworks that are paired with reflective writing that helps us to process teaching encounters, examine personal feelings and encounters. They provide a record of our aesthetic insights and keep us connected to our artist selves during turbulent times. We will also have ample time for questions. As a reminder, please type any questions you have in the chat box. And now, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kay.
Thank you, Christy and Tony, and thank you to all of you that are joining us today. I really appreciate that. What I want to talk about is self-care. It is all too tragic that we are needing so much self-care. I kind of call it extreme self-care right now, to help us stay grounded and focused in a really difficult time that we're all in. So just under normal circumstances, self-care is important, helps us detox and de-stress at the end of a difficult day or a difficult week. Can help us kind of hold and contain our emotions or even release our emotions, depending what kind of practices we engage in. Specifically, art as self-care can help us channel or transform our negative emotions into more creative, positive outlets. I feel like our self-care through art or other practices can help us stay centered and, again, focused and grounded. And they can help us put difficult situations into a proper perspective. So next slide, please. There we go. So Christy gave a really nice description of what visual notes are. And this is a practice that started in my art therapy practice, evolved into a research practice, and I bring it into the classroom in my art ed classes and in my art therapy classes. So as Christy mentioned, visual notes are mini works of art. They're 4 inches by 6 inches, and they combine reflective writing to explore our teaching, or for me, sometimes my therapy encounters, and to help sort of explore the personal feelings that I'm having, and also gain important insights about this practice. One of the things that's really important about this and why I like it is that the 4x6 format is manageable. It's small. It's not like we have to create a large piece of artwork in order to gain some of the benefits of this practice. And also, it's a great way to stay connected with ourselves as artists. Often teachers, educators, therapists feel like they just don't have time for themselves to make art. And so these are just, again, quick little pieces of artwork that helps us feel like we're still artists. So the instructions to make these are fairly simple. Use any art materials that you have available. You can use 3-dimensional materials, 2-dimensional materials, collage, found objects. And I like people to think about an experience. If it's specifically something that has to do with teaching, it might be something in your personal life. It could be just a feeling that you're experiencing at the moment, and transfer your ideas into a little work of art. And after you finish the work, use free prose or poetry to write a reflective response about your artwork. So we can go to the next slide. I want to show you just some examples from my own practice. The one on the left is an example I call shouldering. It's about a time I was working on my dissertation some time ago, and my father was dying, and I was trying to finish my research. I was also helping with his care. And I realized after doing this card, I was so overwhelmed. And this reflected that back to me. And also I realized I was taking too much responsibility for his care, and I needed to ask for help. The image on the right was created when I was working in a special education school, and I had a student that was really angry when she came in the art room, and it was very intense. Felt like all her rage was directed toward me. And the best way I knew to make sense of this was to make art. So I created this collage, Fiery Hot, I titled it, and I used torn magazine images, mostly red, as you'll see, some black and white. And after doing so, I gained clarity about the situation, and I realized that the student was projecting her anger on me. It wasn't about me, but it sure felt like it. And I can imagine we've all had situations like this. But I found this practice was really important and helpful in my self-care. Go to the next slide, please. So this is another 4x6 visual note. It's done on a small piece of canvas, and you can see I've used found objects and beads, and each one represents one of my students in a particular class. And this was a way that I could reflect back to them a little bit about how I was feeling about them as a whole, and just making a little piece of work about our collaborative community experience. And this is something we may want to be doing now. We're missing a lot of our students. We're not seeing them directly, but even doing a small, almost like a gift piece of artwork to post on Zoom or Google Classroom, or just start a class and just let them know I'm thinking about you. And I represented each one of you in this little piece of artwork. Next slide, please. So I wanted to include this slide. This was a journal, 2 pages in a journal that one of my students gave me permission to use. And while they're not 4x6 visual notes, I really liked what she said about this process of making art. So Petra says, making art in my journal helps me cope with my intense emotions in my work and in my life. My artwork metaphorically provides a way to deeply express and a place to hold them. And I think that's really, really important that, you know, when we're teaching, we can't always separate our work and our life. We need to kind of keep our life bracketed, but sometimes we have intense emotions about what's going on, and we need a place to express them and a place to contain and hold them. And I think Petra expressed that nicely in her visual journal and also in her reflective prose. Got another slide with an example or 3 examples of visual notes. These were done by another student, and you can see she used a wide range of art materials, mixed media, paint, found objects, collage materials. And these were done, as Ariel said, in response to the varied needs of her students. She integrated experimental play and empathetic awareness into what she called her interdisciplinary choice-based, process-oriented, and multiculturalist teaching practice. This particular series, she stated, documents her experiences working with student artists who have varied learning styles. So you can see there's a lot of different ways to do these, different ways to approach these, and different topics, different focus. It just depends what you feel like you need to communicate and express at the time. Let's see. So we're going to switch now just to talk a little bit about what to do during a traumatic time. And certainly we all are existing in a traumatic time. And some things, as educators, we certainly have to confront a lot of issues. Before this pandemic we did, and as teachers in our schools and just in society, we're called upon to offer support to our students, to our colleagues, and to our communities. Sometimes it's difficult to know what to say and how to provide comfort. There's no right or wrong way to do this. However, practicing some basic acts of kindness can be helpful, and showing care and concern will be remembered. So what I'd like to just go over briefly are these 6 points. Practicing empathy, practicing patience. This includes kindness, listening, reflecting, and affirming. And I always like to think that who we are matters as much as what we do. And when I talk about practicing empathy, it's not only with our students, but with ourselves as well. The next point is normalizing distress. And here I just always try to sort of affirm or explain that this experience you're going through, whatever feeling you're having, it's normal to feel sad. It's normal to feel frustrated, whatever the emotions are. And acknowledging students' courage and flexibility and resilience during a difficult time, I think is really important. And as art educators, I think we've got a really wonderful tool at our fingertips, because art can help normalize an experience for ourselves and for students. Another important thing I think for us all to do is emphasize the here and now. This we could just do with just focusing on the moment. Might want to suggest that we, and again, I'm talking about what we can do for ourselves and what we can do for our students, but suggest students maybe make a simple doodle on paper that depicts whatever their fears or worries might be, use colors and shapes and lines. I do that sometimes in my class, and we even make the drawings and then we fold them up or tear them up and put them in a little worry box or a stress box and put the top on them. But again, just acknowledging what someone's experiencing now and affirming that it's okay, no matter what they're experiencing. Another thing important for us to do is emphasize safety, reinforce that right here, right now, in this moment, that they are safe. attending to sensory responses. By this, I mean that we interact with the world around us through our senses. So we can offer simple relaxation exercises that involve the senses, pleasing sounds, sights, smells. We can have students do, or we can also do this ourselves. We can have them do write poetry about their senses, paying attention to things in nature, in beauty around them, but helping kids ground themselves in their body and connect sensorially is a really important thing to do during traumatic times. And finally is introducing self-empowerment, reinforcing a sense of capability, accomplishment, and acknowledging one's strengths. And these are all practices, I think, that are important in good teaching practices, but particularly important during traumatic times. So next slide, please. So what can art teachers do? We've talked about making visual notes, but you could also make any kind of art. You can make a visual journal. You can create daily mandalas. These are small circular designs that start at a center and radiate outwards. You might create an altered book, or do small post-it drawings or mini still life photographs. I know for me right now, working on something large is really difficult. So I'm just doing some very small little pieces of artwork every day. And I'm finding that to be a really helpful self-care practice. Let's see, breathing. This is something we all need to practice. Deep breath, just inhale and exhale. But you can also try this particular exercise I call a balance exercise and a breathing exercise combined. So the first letter of this breathing exercise is breathe, B, A, end, L for let go, another A for and, naturally, C for create, and E for energy. And I've just did this last week with my class, and it was they really responded well to it. It didn't take very long. It's something that you can stop, and wherever you are, whether you're sitting or standing, you can kind of take yourself through this visually and feel like you have a little bit more balance after you've done this. Let's see, I'd like to also just suggest that we exercise whatever you're comfortable with. If you do yoga, practice Pilates, Tai Chi, if you like to jog or walk, lift weights, whatever it is, I think that's really important during traumatic times, that we make sure we exercise and get our heart rates up. Another practice that you could do is connecting with nature and the beauty around you. Nature has healing potentials, and we need to connect with those, whether we're just looking outside our windows or taking a short walk. Another practice would be meditate. Using guided imageries, practicing mindfulness. These are all things that can help us take care of ourselves, and we can introduce those to our students as well. We can make gratitude lists. We can keep an abundance journal. We can just even say to ourselves after every day, at the beginning of the day or the end of the day, something that you're grateful for. Again, this is something I started a class 2 weeks ago with just going around in our circle and talking about something that we were grateful for or something we appreciated. You can do that at a beginning check-in or at the when you kind of check out at the end of a class to kind of bring some closure. Let's see, I'd also like to suggest that we find support, either our family, our friends, our colleagues, as these are all just, I feel like, important practices that we can do for ourselves during difficult times. I recently watched the movie. I don't know if some of you have seen this too, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood with Tom Hanks, about the life and legacy of Fred Rogers. And I find one of these quotes that Fred said, particularly apropos during this time, that in times of stress, the best thing we can do for each other is to listen with our ears and our hearts and be assured that our questions are just as important as our answers. Thank you. Okay. Go to the next slide.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. K. Let's see if we can ask you a few questions here. We'll answer as many as we have time for. So please, if you haven't typed any questions that you might have in the chat, and also you can use the Q&A function. We do have one question from someone who is currently student teaching,
Okay.
and she's wondering how you're handling the disruption with any student teachers you may be working with, and if you have any advice for student teachers who are experiencing this sudden change.
Well, I have a group of student teachers that I work with, and we have a cluster site, a photo sharing site, where they post their visual notes that they're doing every week. So they're able to give themselves feedback and support. And I can also be on that chat as well, or on that site. We found that's a really useful way for us to stay connected during this time. Interestingly enough, and as you might expect, the assignment for these visual notes in the class are for them to do response art, so to speak, about their encounters and experiences with their students in their classes. But now, since they're not working directly with their students, they're switching. These visual notes are about some of the challenges that their experiences and some of their worries, some of their fears, some of their concerns. I mean, it's a great way to get those feelings out. And I've also started posting my visual notes on that particular site. I don't usually post notes each week, but I'm doing those with them as well. I don't know if that helps or answers your question.
Great. And when you create visual notes with students, do you vary the amount of time based on age, experience, or anything else? And do you have any suggestions for how to modify for various considerations?
Well, I teach at the higher ed level, so the assignment, it's 4x6, and they have this particular prompt, and so I don't necessarily modify that. But I have had students that have chosen to do them with clay instead of two-dimensional materials. I think you could certainly add different steps to them, different prompts, depending on what it was you wanted to accomplish. So yeah.
Is there a prompt you suggest for working with the visual notes, or how do you help a student who's having difficulty responding to the visual note being open-ended? Do you suggest a topic?
The topic, again, it could be a feeling, it could be an experience, it could be a challenge, it can be just about anything you want to do. What I have found, I do have some, and I believe these are in the handout. I have some structured reflective prompts or ways to write either an I am poem about the artwork, I am the sound of, I am kind of a fill in the blank Mad Lib format. I am the sound, sight, touch, feel, experience, and you just sort of look at the artwork and then fill in what your response is. You could do a haiku poem about the artwork, or just free prose. And I find that really helps students connect both with the visual and the emotional or the cognitive responses to the visual notes.
Great. And what if a student depicts fear or worry in an artwork when they're doing the visual notes, and instead of relief, it may trigger more fear? As an art teacher, how do you handle that type of situation?
Well, sometimes what I would have students do is sort of transform the image, like go back into it, manipulate it, do something, alter it in a way that it's not as fearful, it's not as scary. That seems to be a way that you can help students kind of gain mastery or control over that particular image. In my art therapy practice, if I had a student that, or a client or a patient that had an image that was fearful or worrisome or traumatic, sometimes I would have them do, I don't know if people are familiar with emotional freedom therapy. It's a form of acupressure, and I would use that. And it is something that I don't see why art teachers couldn't use in the classroom. It involves what's called tapping, whereas people would tap on top of their heads or on your wrists or their different places on your body to kind of balance the meridians. But what students would do, what you would ask students to do is like rate their stress, rate their worry, rate anxiety from 1 to 10 before they did the tapping exercise. And then also while they're doing this tapping on their body, they would say, even though I have this stress, this worry, this anxiety, I completely accept myself. So I think that's really important that we kind of teach our students that, yeah, you can have this stress, this worry, but you can also transform it. And even though you have it, you're still a good person. It doesn't define you. And that's something that as teachers is well within our limits and practice. So that's what I would suggest: manipulate the image some way. Alter it, maybe pair that with having students, rating that, and even do some of this emotional freedom therapy. With little kids, sometimes it's like the game head, shoulders, knees, and toes. And I would have kids, tap inside their head, tap their shoulders, tap their ankles, take their arms, their legs, their toes, and pair it with this affirmation. I think that's really, really important. And I guess, as always, if you feel like you've got a student that needs extra support and extra help, then you would refer them to your school counselor or your social worker or whoever in your school. Many schools don't have art therapists, but you may have school psychologists or counselors. So definitely, refer them to someone else if you feel like intuitively things are too intense and students need more support and help.
Great. Yeah, we're getting a lot of questions from people with the lower elementary, very young grades, looks like even like K-2. How do we help those students engage in this kind of a process using the visual notes when they might be reluctant or might need more assistance?
It's a really good question. I have not done this with really young children. I would find the 4x6 size to be pretty limited for a small child that needs more gross motor experiences. So I'm not sure it's applicable. So I need to think about that just a little bit. I'd certainly give kids more larger art materials to work with, Chunko crayons perhaps, maybe even 2 crayons and 1 crayon in each hand, and let them do non-dominant hand drawings. One thing is I'm thinking out loud, and I appreciate you let me do that. I might even have students draw, or it might be something you would draw, a thick boundary around the edge of the paper to help contain whatever students wanted to put inside their boundary. That might be a good helpful practice for them. Yeah, I'm going to think about that a little bit more.
Sure. Looks like people are enjoying the art making process. We have one comment here from Naomi, who says, I have been journaling in clay by making a paper clay pinch pot every day to document my daily emotional state. This practice has been meditative and centering while also helping me connect with my feelings.
Excellent. What a great suggestion. Thank you, Naomi.
And we also have a couple of questions about engaging the community at large, either the school community or your family or whatever community means to you. Would you suggest doing this visual notes project with a large group like a community or a school? Or do you have other suggestions for how we can help and engage those folks with self-care?
I think it'd be a wonderful thing to do with a group, especially because it's so small and you can use whatever materials that you might have at hand. You might have newspaper, you might have tissue paper, you might have recycled cardboard, whatever you can get your hands on. And there are ways that now that people can take a photograph, they can be scanned quickly, and they could be put together in a large collaborative piece, which is something that I do at the end of the semester with my students. We do an exhibition of all of these. And so I think, especially now, if you wanted to do something like that and you had the capacity to put them all together almost in a patchwork quilt, and then everyone could be a part of it. I think anything that you could do that people could collaborate on and add to and feel a part of the whole could be really supportive, especially now.
I think, so in case anyone missed it also, our original intention was for people who wanted to create a visual note while we were talking so that you could kind of make and think and connect and respond to how the conversation was going. But I also understand, like for me personally, it would be too much for me. So I'm going to do mine after the session. But please, we would love for you to engage in the visual notes in any way that makes sense to you. So if it helps you to process by making while we're talking, please do that. And if it's too much for you and you need to wait until afterwards, that's also totally fine. So don't feel pressured. We really are trying to provide a forum for you all to be able to express and to engage with Dr. K and all participate self-care. So I think we also need to be nice to ourselves at this point, and do what makes you, what is good for you, which might not be great for everyone. So just to pay attention to what each of us needs at this moment. Great. So it looks like a lot of folks are also transitioning to either teaching or supporting or providing online or through Google Classroom or Zoom or similar kind of remote and digital needs. How do you suggest they help students with therapeutic approaches or even self-care for students during this kind of crazy transition that we're having?
It's a really, really good question. And one of the things that pops in the mind is having them have a journal that they make artwork in to help contain some of their feelings. Again, certainly these little visual notes are something they can do. One thing I think is pretty important, and I've been talking to my college students about it, is taking some time out away from the computer, because it's exhausting. It's really tiring if you're spending your whole day in front of a screen. And I don't know, I mean, there are times I'm on from 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock and just have meetings or class every hour, and I assume other people do too. So we just got to schedule some little breaks, drink water, take some time to even stand up and stretch. I think we sometimes forget about that. We got to take breaks. In my classes, we still schedule breaks throughout the class. I think it's really challenging for students right now, and for educators, that we're holding a space virtually and digitally that energetically is really challenging. So I think we've just got to make sure our students take breaks, we take breaks, and we build in some different transitions. Maybe we need to transition more frequently. If we would do it every 30 minutes, maybe we need to make a transition every 20 minutes. Maybe we need to kind of change what our expectations are. I know that's what I've been doing in negotiating that with the class each week. I meet with my classes every week for 2.5 hours, which is a long time to hold a class on Zoom. So we come up with solutions together, and I know that doesn't always work, depending what size your class is and what age you're teaching, and how things are set up. But I think going back to what Christy just said too, we've got to be kind to ourselves and show ourselves empathy and be sensitive to our students' needs, and check in with them frequently, which is something that is a practice in my classes, that we do a check-in and a warm-up, and we do kind of a check-out and a closure. Different rituals we're coming up with doing each class, whether it's checking in, what are you grateful for, what makes you happy, what makes you smile, and again, it depends what your age group is. Yeah, some sort of closing activity. One of the things that I wrote about in the book, and then I've adapted it a little bit, I usually have a crayon box, and we start with a crayon box, and pass the crayon around, and everyone can pick a crayon that's just how they feel, or a color they want to be, or their favorite color. But we've been using that in my class as our warm-up and check-in, and gives people or the class an opportunity to just talk about whatever they're connecting with that color. And then we circle back at the end of the class, and they can pick the same color, or they can change colors. They may still be feeling the same way, or they may have changed just a little bit. And we last week even read Harold and the Purple Crayon, which is one of my favorite stories. And this is for college students. You know, we're reading Harold and the Purple Crayon, and then they're getting their magic crayon and drawing pictures or imagining where they want to go and what they want to do. So again, one of my my students, well, Issa Revel, who did the illustrations for the book, just said, you know, it is challenging, but as art educators, we are known for, and we are good at being flexible and being creative and coming up with all kinds of strategies. So I think we just need to remind ourselves that we're equipped with a lot of creative tools, and to use them right now. It's different, and just I'll share with you, I've never taught online before, so it's been quite a quick learning curve for me. But I do find that some of the things that I would do in class, I'm doing the same things online. So those particular approaches, I think, are applicable to the online context.
Great. I know, I think our original intention too, when we were talking about having the webinar series, was really to provide just a break for teachers to think about, you know, and respond to what's happening and what that means for, you know, what that means for our profession, but also to acknowledge that we need a minute too, and not to be afraid to take a minute to have a, you know, to have a deep breath or to have tea with someone virtually or, you know, or 6 feet away. But I think that also acknowledging that this time is traumatic for everyone, I know has kind of helped me put things in perspective personally. And one of the questions we have here is about trauma-informed approaches. So when you do the visual notes project, does it shift any when you use it or when you look at it through a trauma-informed lens?
I mean, it could, but I do want to go back. This practice is something that I use as a reflective practice for pre-service art teachers and pre-service art therapists. So it's a way for them to help become connected with what's happening in their practice and understanding themselves. But trauma-informed care or trauma-informed practices certainly is being empathetic and understanding with your students. If something were to surface, you certainly want to use empathy as a way to connect with them. You want to help them be grounded in their bodies and in their experience, and you want to support their strengths. A lot of the things that, you know, I talked about a little bit earlier, practicing empathy, normalizing their distress, are certainly trauma-informed practices. You could use this definitely as a way to help them express their feelings. I don't know that it's necessarily a trauma-informed practice. Does that make, I don't know if that makes sense or not, or addresses the question.
Yes, I think the important thing is that the way that I think the visual notes are intended is really about self-care and reflective practice, as opposed to a trauma-informed specific lesson to be used with your students, although they could certainly benefit from the same kind of reflective practice, just with I think a little bit of a different intention. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. Absolutely.
Great. Well, I would really like to tell everybody, because some of the comments are about sharing the visual notes. So Tony, if you could go to the next slide. We are really excited to have all of you with us today, and we are really happy to see, and if you're comfortable sharing, what visual notes you have created, or the various ways you're saying in the chat box. It looks like people are doing all kinds of wonderfully creative things as a process of self-care. If you are comfortable sharing your visual notes that you created today, or want to share any other ways you are practicing artful self-care, if you would tag Davis on social media, we can do Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can see us there. You could be entered into a drawing for a free copy of Dr. K's book, Therapeutic Approaches in Art Education, which just came out. We are super excited about it. My copy just came a couple days ago, and I love it. There's lots of fantastic content in there. It is very, very user-friendly. It has lots of things that you can use in your classrooms immediately, and there's tons of really fun play sheets that you can explore. And let's see, we also have lots of great other resources for you. We did another webinar that you can access for free on our site. That's available now. The book is up. Davis has all kinds of other really wonderful things for you also. And we also have more webinars coming up. So if you want to hang out with us, hopefully it will be a little break for you and a little self-care for you to, connect with other art teachers and all of our wonderful experts and panelists. Tuesdays at 3 o'clock. Next week, we will be talking with Melissa Purty and Ian Sands about choice-based art education. After that, we have the fantastic Rob Sandagata and Carl Cole talking about working with contemporary art, and they'll show you lots of resources to use for that. We have Lorinda Rice and Lisa Stewart Whitehead talking with a bunch of art supervisors about what's going on right now and what their concerns are and how they're reacting to it. On May 5th, we will be talking to the world-renowned Michael Townsend and Leah Smith of the Tape Art crew about how to make tape art collaboratively. And also they do a lot of work with healing, which I think is going to be a great tie-in with this particular session. And we have other topics also that you can see at the davisart.com/free resources. And most of all, I would like to thank Dr. K for hanging out with us this afternoon and providing such wonderful self-care tips for everyone. I'm really looking forward to seeing everyone's visual notes on social media. And I just really want to say thank you all for coming today. And we hope that this session was a nice little break and a little therapeutic for you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. We hope to see everyone next week.
Great.